All right, everyone, we are back. And unfortunately, my camera here decided to say it doesn't want to show me anymore. So you're going to get my picture. But we have our last presenter before we do our closing comments and putting these pieces together is the Commissioner of Education from Rhode Island, Angelica Infante Green. She has been a leader and is passionate about equitable and accessible, high quality instruction there for students. During the pandemic, she never let up. She continued to hold that true. And so it's such an honor and privilege to have her with us as she has faced some of the greatest challenges, leading not just a school or a district, but an entire state. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner of Rhode Island. And again, as I was telling the audience, it is just always an honor and privilege to have you. And I just said you are a champion of change. You care about the kids. You're always focused on that equity and access, and it doesn't matter what is thrown at you. And we saw that through the pandemic. You just took it on, you persevered, and you made sure everybody was there with you. So kudos. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. I think I'll take you a little bit through the journey and what it means for us for STEM. So in March 2020, as all of you experienced, we had our first case actually in February. We closed our schools down for a week. We prepared and we started doing distance learning like many of you. What then happened is that we started putting in place the moment we went out, how we were going to come back. And that summer we ran summer school in person and digitally. And one of the main areas that we looked at was STEM. So we spent a lot of time in that area. And what we did is that we worked with students to build these summer courses. And what we found is that the students that enrolled and were part of this program actually saw 50-point gains in math on the SAT. And kids that were further behind saw about a 100-point gain on average on the SAT in math. So that was pretty exciting for us because it's the first time as a state that we would run a program from our end. And like many of you, we started going, we ran summer school, we had pre-K open, we were open in June of 2020. And then we pushed forth and we opened all the schools in September. We were fully in person. And we really pushed on the different academic areas. Like we talked about accessibility. We made sure that every student had a device, like many of you, but also Wi-Fi. That was something that we made available throughout the state day one. From the first day we went out, we had that available for everyone. And it was about really how are we going to make it engaging and exciting for the kids as we went back to school. And we really focused our energy around the different disciplines and content area and how to really use technology. So I think that that was really impactful for us. So one of the things that we did as a state, and I'm talking from a state perspective, is that because we didn't have our state assessment last year, a couple of the things that we did is that we purchased for all our districts assessments, interim assessments, so that we at the state could get that data. And why would we want that data? Because we wanted to create a plan of how we were going to move forward. Everybody was talking about the gaps and what happened with the kids during COVID, but nobody really had data. So we collected that data and everybody was really worried about secondary. But what we found with the data statewide was that our kids were impacted in the lower grades a lot more than in the upper grades. And not so much everybody was thinking about literacy, but really math. Math is the place that we saw the most impact for COVID for our state. It's already a place that we struggled with. So it stands to reason that it would be a bigger impact through our interim assessments. We had now our state assessment, and we've just gotten the raw scores this week, and we are already seeing that disparity. But before the school year was over, we convened experts, local, national, experts to really help us think about what we are going to redesign and what we're going to do in the state of Rhode Island and where our energy has to be. So we created the Learning Equity Advanced Pathway Task Force. I know, a lot of words, partly because we didn't want to talk about remediation. We've done that, been there, done that. We don't want to do that again. We really wanted to talk about making the different content areas, science, technology, engineering, and math, available to all the kids. And this is where we wanted to drive our agenda. So we created this task force. And in this task force, we really looked at the data that we had and how do we move forward. And what we've come up with is some recommendations that we have for a state, how we're going to use our ESSA funding, the recommendations for districts in terms of creating their applications for the funding that have to address these particular areas. And we led with two very distinct populations. Our multilingual learners and our differently able students are front and center. We didn't put it in as an add-on. This is the population that we wanted you to look at first, and then everything else came afterwards, as well as race and socioeconomic status. So we created these recommendations that we're putting forth today that we have used to kind of lead in the work that we're doing. And part of that is really reimagining what secondary education looks like. So what does STEM look like in the entire state of Rhode Island? What do our coding classes look like? How do we reimagine it? I think nationwide we have an opportunity that none of us have had and will probably ever have in our professional careers to really reimagining what school looks like. And for us, it's really bridging that gap. So in secondary education, why do kids have to come from 8 to 3? Why can't we have a school that starts from 7:30 in the morning and ends at 10 o'clock at night, that kids can kind of take the courses, work, do internships, that they can actually get a diploma as well as credentials, so that we're reimagining that kids are helping us lead the way and using technology as the vehicle, as well as all our courses and our resources that we have here. So CBS is stationed here in Rhode Island, and working with them as part of the hub to move our student population to the next level in terms of science and technology and math. So for us, that has been a bit thrust during this pandemic. And that's what we're expecting to see from all the districts, is the innovation around STEM. And that is part of the work that we're embarking in right now. So I think that that's where we are. We're going to be in person again. We've already been in person. But we're pushing hard on the areas that we have not. Our multilingual learners, our differently able students, closing that achievement gap. We've been doing school the same way for over 100 years. And then we keep talking about why aren't we meeting the needs of different students when we haven't changed what we're doing. And that's what we're going to do, is push that innovation. We're working with XQ to really reimagine what the secondary experience will be like for our students. And it has to be really driven by the fields that make sense for them. And I have to say that 90% of our students are interested, but we're not preparing them to be in this field. So what we're doing is redesigning what our requirements are for graduation around a more hands-on experience, around an experience that really drives the students in a direction that allows them to explore many different opportunities in the different fields. So that's where we are. And we are extremely proud of the work that we've done, but we also know that there's so much more work to be done. We can share what we've put together with you, but this is how we are actually going to judge our progress. And it is not about intervention. I want to repeat that. It is about really figuring out, what does that look like? And for us, one of the things that we learned during the pandemic, we hosted a cohort of tutoring services for math free that we did for all ninth graders. And we saw the jump. And when we say math, we're not just talking about remedial math or just helping them with algebra, but just expanding. What does that really look like? What does digital design look like? What does all this look like through these tutoring done by experts in the field, not just our classroom teachers, but scientists, engineers. We partnered with MIT. We partnered with different organizations. We partnered with Khan Academy, not to do the recorded sessions, but live sessions with experts from all around the world that would help our students reach the next level. So we're really excited about this opportunity. We are incredibly grateful to Kelly and Sal for really pushing this agenda and making us think out of the box, because that's what we're doing. Because of your thrust, this is always at the forefront as we do our work. I don't know if we're having questions or not, but I'm here to answer anything that you have for me.
Okay.
You're on mute, Kelly.
Sorry, I wasn't quite fast enough. I had you on the other computer and I had to stop the sound on that one. So this was great. And so as we prepare for the upcoming school year, what's the area that is how are you going to start the school year? Let's just start with that.
How are we going to start the school year? Well, We're all in person, period. And we were in person last year, so we ended the school year with 90% of our kids in person. So that's non-negotiable for us. We're just hitting the ground running. We realize that our kids need to be in school, need to be with their peers. The social emotional impact of all this has really been a big toll. But what we know is that our kids were better at using technology, better at figuring out how all this was going to work, and really came back to us and said, we need you to think out of the box. So we are starting with a think tank with the students, with our secondary students, really telling us what are the innovation that they expect to see and for us to figure out collectively.
So how do you, as you kind of move that first level forward there, and then, we start to, a lot of it right now is just, you hit upon it, the social emotional piece of it. I mean, how do we address that? I mean, you think about it and stuff, it's like, we don't know everything that these children have gone through. And so we got to get to the learning, but you got to address this first. So how do you talk about that?
So there's a couple of things. We partnered with Pure Edge, and we did self-care for teachers statewide, for parents and for students. And the other thing that we did is that we reached out to Yale University, and we have a 10-hour course for everyone in the education system, not just teachers, but also if you work in the kitchen, if you drive a bus, if you are in the main office, if you're a teacher's assistant. This 10-hour course on social emotional development, you get a certificate from Yale at the end, but it is for everyone. It's self-paced, 10 hours, so that we know how to look for the signs, how to have the conversations. This is all very new, but we need everybody in the state of Rhode Island. This is open to everybody, free of charge, so that we can be on the same page. So that's one. Two, guidance counselors. We put forth that's one of the things that we need to see in everybody's plan is what is the role of the guidance counselor? And if you don't have enough guidance counselors, who are you bringing in? Who are you partnering with? Are you getting more? What kind of teams are going to be put together? So that is really important for us, because it's not just in the urban sector has been more affected by COVID. And so we have the people that have been personally affected, their families, and then there's the isolation, the anxiety, all these different factors that we need to simultaneously do that maybe teachers weren't doing prior to the pandemic. So, but we need it for the teachers as well. Right? So we have that piece for the teachers, and then learning for all the educators, everyone, and then the students as a whole, and then what are the supports that you need in the building. So we don't expect to hear that we don't have a social worker or a guidance counselor in the building, because now it's going to be more important than ever. So that's our expectation.
That's wonderful. I mean, and you're right. You have to start with the educator. You have to start with them, and then you can really build that support out. And it's something that's so needed. I think during the pandemic, there were silver linings. One of them being that, right, it's like we all got a crash course in technology. So everybody was in it. I think the other thing, too, is that as we come back, there's also more of that collaboration now happening. There's more of, I mean, here we preach about integrated STEM because it's all about connecting the dots. And I think there was a lot more where you had to work with your peers because everybody was learning together. And so as we think about kind of this movement forward, and especially, you know, there was a lot of emphasis on the numeracy and literacy when we jump started into the pandemic. And now we're starting to really build all of those pieces together. And since this is our global STEM audience here, what are some of your thoughts? How's Rhode Island going to move forward? And, you know, are there any stories of what you want to share, kind of what happened during the pandemic? Because I'm sure you saw a lot, and I'm sure there were some pretty cool things that you saw that were happening that we'd love to share.
Yeah, so I think we did see the literacy and the numeracy, but we also saw a lot of innovation. So we ran a couple of statewide contests. So I'll share this. You know, during the pandemic, I really wanted to get this machine, but it was too expensive, where you put the iPad on a pole and they have wheels and the kids could be in the classroom if they were out on quarantine. So we had this challenge for our kids. You got a certain amount of money, you got gift cards, you worked in groups, create it, you know. Use what you've learned in Lego robotics. Create something that simulates that we can use in the classroom. And we're still in the process of that. So we were really ecstatic about that because we were trying to create solutions for real life problems of what was happening in the pandemic. The other piece is that we also had students working together to create solutions in terms of, we had these air scrubbers. Before we got the HEPA filter, we had these huge air scrubbers, but the problem with that in the cafeteria, in the bigger spaces, was that they were so noisy. So our kids worked together to create like funnels of getting the noise out. Some of them worked well, some of them did not. But we used some of the creation, development, and they worked with the National Guard to create some of those solutions. So that was pretty cool. And one of our teachers called it forced innovation, one of our science teachers. This is where we had to figure it out very quickly. And a lot of our classrooms, our in-person classrooms last September, started out outside. So we got donations from, you know, like Home Depot, Lowe's, to have these buckets that they became then seating. They had to design what the outdoor classroom looked like. This was with the students so that we can use our present situation to be innovative, right? Like what? So we can't bring everything outside. So what can we do that is different? How can you now have these games in the playground where you're not touching the same ball all the time and you're not wearing gloves? So what can we do? So there was a lot of that going on. We also had a contest to create apps for quarantining, because that became extremely difficult when we had to quarantine classes and who was on what bus. So we had a contest where the kids helped create those apps that we would use for attestation. So it was pretty cool. Like, we used it as a way to push our thinking and to really engage the kids and keep them positive and moving forward. And what we learned was that we were not challenging our kids enough because they rose to the occasion. So it really is pushing us to look at our standards, to really look at what we are, what pathways we have for our students, and reinvent what those pathways could look like, because we fell short. I feel like we were sort of building the plane as we were flying like everyone else, but there were definite things that we realized that we could have been doing that would have allowed for that innovation to move a lot faster than it actually did. So there was a lot of learning for us, a lot of learning. And the biggest learning was how much the kids understood what they were getting and what they weren't getting. And also the need to work statewide. So they really, when we put out these challenges, they really worked across sectors that they had never worked in. So we had urbans and suburbans working together, and they want to do more of that. They want to work together. They don't want the cities to limit their ability to work and be innovative and partner. So that's part of what we're doing. The other piece is that, science is a shortage area in secondary education. So we're sort of breaking some of those barriers and figuring out, having some pilots about how we do that statewide, kids from different communities in these virtual classrooms that where we would normally not have a teacher. We wouldn't have a physics teacher in a very rural community. So how do we bridge that? So those are some of the learnings, some of the exciting things, and parents got really involved. During our snow days, we had challenges where they had to build sleds out of cardboard and, kind of the things that you would want to do in the classroom. You would design it beforehand and sketch it out and measure. And so we tried to use every opportunity to keep pushing our students, ourselves, to think out of the box.
And that's what it's all about. It's taking everything that you've learned from the classroom, and now you're putting it out to the real world. And the kids are solving those problems. So I love how you said that too. And I have to tell you, we have our audiences said, one comment is that I'm smiling so big right now. So this is just awesome examples of project-based learning. So another question that I have, and I know we're close to the end of the time, but how do we, you're a stellar leader, you're passionate, you care deeply, you're all about the kids. How do we inspire schools and districts to really, and even other states, to kind of continue with that advancement moving forward? It's that hope, it's that inspiration there, because you can get discouraged so easily. And, we talk about, we don't know anyone's situation. And so you could be coming from isolation. You could have been coming from some other place. How do we build this back up? How do we kind of say, rah, 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 we're all in it together? Because it wasn't just the pandemic that hit us. There was a lot of other things, a lot of unrest. And so how do we move forward? Whether you're at a school level, a district level, or a state level?
So that's a really tough time. There were moments that we were definitely physically and emotionally exhausted. But then there were moments that, because we came back in September, that we saw the excitement. So we have a survey that we do statewide of teachers and students. And what we saw is that in every single case, the students felt like they were so excited to be in the classroom that a lot of the other issues that would happen prior, maybe even, behavior issues, those were gone. Everybody was so grateful to be in the space that there is, you'll see that if you haven't been back, you're going to see at first a little bit of apprehension, but then the excitement to be around your peers, even for the educators to be together. You're going to see that there's a different drive. There's a different sense of belonging, because we sort of lost all of that for a little bit of time. So when we did, and I'm happy to share the data that we have on how we put in COVID questions, and the kids really felt like the teachers went above and beyond during the pandemic. And there's a sense of gratitude that we did not see before. So for everyone, I think it's really finding those bright spots and really figuring out, how do you capitalize it? I mean, we have tons of money now that we did not have. what is going to really make that change? And we have said we don't want to see more of the same. We don't want to see intervention. We want to see really moving forward. How do we really, we don't have a lot of the limitations we had before. And I think we need to really keep pushing in that way. And when you see the kids, I'm really excited about our data. I have to tell you, I'm hopeful that our data doesn't look the way that everybody keeps talking about it. But what I do know is that the kids feel like we're listening, we're supporting them, and the teachers. So I think take a poll and find those bright spots, the things that you've learned, and the teachers that have learned different things that they're doing in their classroom, because some teachers really were thinking out of the box to keep the kids engaged in a very difficult time. So I think make the kids your North Star, and you just keep moving forward.
I love that, the North Star there. There was another question that came up that said, do you think that this type of problem-based learning will be more strongly integrated into the curriculum this upcoming academic year? Will teachers incorporate it by teachers into their design of instruction, or do you see instruction returning to more teacher-centered classrooms? And then the second part is, how do you maintain the momentum?
Well, I don't quite know how to answer the second part because we're not there. But I think that you give teachers the opportunity to lead, right? I think we've learned a lot, and I think we rise to the expectation. So the question for me is, how do we raise the bar? What we've learned, we can't go back to where we were. There's no way we can go back there. Like, one, the kids won't let us. Two, that ship has sailed, and there are really few excuses for us to not be able to move forward. And our plans, the district plans, have to incorporate all of this innovation and all of this, how we're going to integrate all the work that we're doing so that we can have better opportunities and pathways for our kids. And I keep saying that because we just think of the traditional, and we have to start very young to set that up for kids. And so that is what we're expecting to see. And we will send applications back if we don't see that there, and we're willing to help. So part of our journey is that we're not just compliance in the state of Rhode Island. We are trying to be true partners with our districts and trying to come up with solutions, like bringing people to help us think out of the box and push our thinking is where we are. So hopefully there'll be enough momentum and really, empowering the people on the ground to really push, the progress.
Oh, that's great. So that leads into kind of this next part of it, is thinking about families and parents. This was an enormous strain on parents. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, though, as that strain was placed on them, because we were all learning new things, we're all doing this, but there is that silver lining that parents became involved. And how do we move this forward? Because sometimes it's like when you're in the classroom setting, it's a little bit different. It's like you want the parents, and you want the parents to be supportive, but now parents feel like they have a stronger voice. They have a deeper understanding. So what are the plans to continue that work with parents and families?
Well, that's exciting. So that's one of our pillars in the state of Rhode Island, is engaged communities. And that means that we have a responsibility. And once again, in our plans, we have to really talk about how we're going to continue engagement, expand engagement. One of the good things about Zoom is that those parents that work long hours or couldn't come to the school building, you can have that connection now, right? You can give them the ability to have that one-on-one with the teacher in a different way. The other piece is that families that may not have had access to technology, almost all of them have a smartphone. We learned that during the pandemic, was creating an app for families where they could get that information, where they could continuously learn and keep up with what's happening, and a lot of workshops and town halls. So part of our goal is to really engage the families in what does that next step look like. And for us in the urban sector, in the places that have been most impacted is really having the parents have opportunities for parents as well. So we were stuck in a very difficult place because we didn't have more bus drivers during the pandemic early on. So getting parents to be part of filling the jobs opportunities that we have in the state, partnering with the different divisions of state agencies to really forge that partnership with parents where they see themselves as part of the solution, benefiting from what we're doing, and just getting real live information to them. So that we hope to continue to do that. And we're measuring our success. I mentioned that survey that we're giving out. We're measuring our success through the parents rating how effective we are with communicating with them and keeping them involved. So we have new metrics. So we'll see where we go with that.
Oh, that's great. And another question too is just, so as we've kind of gone through this, we've learned all of these lessons here, and we've started to think about instruction differently. How has that also influenced and changed the delivery of professional development? I mean, in some ways, you started to talk about the urban and suburban, the communities there, and then all of a sudden, but has that also changed how professional development has been delivered? Is it more statewide? Is it talk just more about that professional development plan?
So that's really exciting. I think that's one of the biggest things that happened to us is that we had statewide PD. So virtually, obviously, that's how we could reach everyone. And we found it to be so successful that we added it to our calendar. So we've created a statewide calendar, which had never been done. That's not something, everybody wants to have their own holidays, their own things. So we created a statewide calendar that includes professional development days. And in those days, the district can use those days, but we are going to have statewide. These are the things that we all believe in, that we all have to learn, and they will be a part of that. And we will also then have working groups of teachers, for example, chemistry teachers across the state, working together to kind of create innovation, to look at what the curriculum looks like. And just because we're in one district doesn't mean that it has to be different. How do we also bring in CTE to the conversation? So we're doing this statewide, which we have never done, which is very exciting. It's exciting for us because it's already built in. So last year we had over 50 PD sessions statewide. And it was really interesting to hear the teachers in different environments learn from one another. That was powerful. We, as I've mentioned, we put it in our calendar. We're going to continue to do it this year.
That's really exciting. I mean, just that whole learning capability there. We talk about learning with and from each other. That's truly learning with and from each other. So that's amazing. So, based on, our audience here, we have a global audience. It's a very diverse audience. What's the challenge? What's the challenge that you're facing? And if you had kind of a call out to individuals that are participating, and again, we have all sorts of individuals that are here, what would you be asking for?
So I think the challenge that we're all going to face was partly what somebody asked before, that we don't go back to the same old, and that we have time to plan, because I think everybody's exhausted. There's fatigue with all of this. As much as I love Zoom now, but there's Zoom fatigue. And so it's really not going back to that place. And, for many states, spending the money, it's not going to be as easy, right? There's so many hurdles and so much bureaucracy. It's finding how to get the money in the hands of people that actually have results, right? Because I think that there are many people out there with ideas but don't know how to carry it out. And I think that's part of what we need to do is really advance, look at the research, advance, and move very quickly. But not too quickly that we're doing more of the same. So I hear people saying, oh, no child left behind. We got to, race to the top. We had a lot of money, not much change. So it's incumbent upon us to really, and I know this is the right audience to say this in, but, it's always about literacy. And not that I don't believe in literacy, because I was a reading teacher at one point in my career, but it's how do you bring everything else in, and how is it that we capitalize on that? I think that's part of the challenge that we have, especially when we talk about elementary school, where social studies, science goes by the wayside. And that can't be what we're doing. So I think for us is really pushing the envelope and really figuring out how we get to the kids. And if we're going to extend the day, so everybody's talking about extending the school day, right? But doing more of the same means nothing, right? Like, just let's not do that. Let's create this, I'm into this makerspace thing. I'm sorry. But let's create that, Let's create that space where the kids can build, can really be innovative, and teachers as well. Let's not give another 45 minutes of just reading or just, the traditional. Let's really think out of the box. And I know I've said that like a million times during this session, but it really is hard for us. And I think we need to partner with people that can push us to think differently. And when I say that, I mean people in the industry, right? Like people that are actually doing this work firsthand. We're preparing kids, but where are the people that, where are the astronauts? Where are the scientists? How do we bring them in? How do they help us have this conversation and say to us, that was great, but this is really what we need. We need kids, that's what we need, I think, as an education system.
Yeah, I hear to that. I mean, cheers and applause, because I could not agree more. And, you mentioned this, and I it's getting towards the end here, but the teacher fatigue, it just kind of struck me, because all of a sudden I started to think about, gosh, there are some states that are doing summer school. And then you have this whole talk about extended hours. There was another state that was saying, no, we're going to go to implementing Saturday academies. Who's going to do all of this, right? And so how do you keep, teachers motivated and engaged? And I know we talked about that kind of previously, but that was a little bit on a different level. This is about, working around the clock. And so how do we keep educators, and especially within the U.S., educators don't get the praise that they deserve. And so I do feel out of the pandemic that helped to kind of escalate educators a little bit, because they were in the trenches. Everybody else kind of had to stop and could reshuffle and do things. But we had healthcare workers, you had educators. That was that front line there. So how do we ensure that we don't get that fatigue?
Well, I think one of the things that we tried to do, and we will continue to do, and I encourage everyone who's listening, is to figure out self-care, right? Like we have to do that. We partnered with an organization called Pure Edge, to really start every morning with a self-care for educators, right? Like take that step, and don't feel, somebody will kill me, I'm sure, a principal or superintendent. Take a break. Take a break. We're going to burn out if we don't do that. And that's why we decided to partner and do a lot of the summer school statewide, so that the districts, the people on the ground, could take a break. It's really hard. And everybody needs to re-energize. And there's this excitement because we're endemic, right? Where we can almost see the end of this. But you need to re-energize. You need to do what's right for you so that you could come back and hit the ground running. And there's this, we feel like, okay, we have this money for 2 years. We got to do it all right now. No, we don't have to do it all right now. We don't. I'd rather that we take our time and that we do the right thing, because we'll be wasting the money and our opportunity, and then we'll be burned out for the next 10 months of the school year. So I think everybody has to take some time to refresh, re-energize, and whatever that is. that 1 week we're going to give you off.
That's right.
No, but we need partners, and that's what we've looked for is partnerships, so that they can help us carry some of the water as we move forward.
Well, as I say, you're always uplifting. It's a breath of fresh air. I just admire you, and I just think the work you're doing, it's not easy. Any final comments to this amazing audience that we have that you cannot see, that just kind of some inspiring and motivating thoughts?
Well, first, I want to start off by thanking you. You know, you did the impossible. We didn't know that we could do what we did. So thank you, because it took everybody's energy, creativity, and wherewithal to get to where we are today. So I am tremendously grateful as a parent, as an educator, for the work that you have done. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're more than just educators. Like, we realize now that the kids depend on us for their well-being, not just the academics and their thinking, but just the well-being. And we depend on each other. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And know that you have touched a child in a way that has probably allowed them to survive and thrive during this pandemic. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I speak on behalf of everyone from the STEM Leadership Alliance. We want to just thank you again for your great leadership. And get ready, because 2022, we're going back in person. So we'll be in Orlando, July 11th to the 15th. And we know we're going to want to continue to be on that learning journey with you and to hear what has happened and transformed. So stay tuned, everybody, because this is not just the end here. It's just the beginning. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So we're going to hop on over to our last section here. We're going to do a great wrap up on everything. So let's just get started. We're going to switch over to our closing ceremony. And here we